So the other day, I told you guys that I was predicting a Donald Trump implosion in terms of his approval rating, and that's exactly what happened. So according to, look at this, Quinnipiac poll, new Quinnipiac poll, 33%. Morning Consult poll, 34%. And my buddy here at Bernie Would Have Won on Twitter, you should go follow him, Michael, nice guy. He says, I think this is the lowest I've ever seen his approval rating. This is getting close to George W. Bush levels. So I looked it up, and that's actually correct. His lowest approval rating before this was 35%. And I believe the 35% was either Gallup or Pew. I think it was Gallup. But that's the lowest they ever had him. And I forget exactly when it was. Maybe in like 2017 at one point, or it may have actually been after Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act and then tear gas peaceful protesters to do a photo op with a Bible in front of a church. But 35% was his low. Well, now, according to a new Quinnipiac poll and according to a new Morning Consult poll, he's 33% and 34% respectively, which means it's the lowest ever for Donald Trump. I told you guys this was going to happen. Now, why? Why did this happen? Well, the answer is simple. The last time he had a giant drop in his polling, where Biden ended up taking the lead in the general election race and never looked back and ended up winning, was when Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act. He tear-gassed peaceful protesters, and then he did a photo op with a Bible. And the reason why his numbers plunged now is the same reason why they plunged then, which is Donald Trump is chaotic. Donald Trump brings about mayhem. He feels really, really unstable because he is really, really unstable. And that's basically a quality which is the opposite of what you want in a leader. What you want in a leader, putting aside ideology and policy, which is the most important, don't get it twisted, but putting that aside for a second, in terms of the qualities and the characteristics you want a leader to embody. You want them to feel incredibly stable. You want them to feel strong. You want them to be resolute. You want them to be reassuring. You don't want them to add to the chaos and mayhem of a world that's already far too chaotic and has far too much mayhem. And when Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, that's him saying, I'm going to deploy the U.S. military against the American people, which is just flat out authoritarian. There's no two ways about it. And, Americans thought that's a bridge too far. Then tear gassing the peaceful protesters, which is deeply against the First Amendment. These guys pretend to care about free protest and free speech. Then he does the exact opposite of protecting it. He cracks down on it. People look at that and they think this is not good. Now, this time, it was perhaps even worse. And in terms of the numbers, yes, he's dropped even lower than he did then. Because here you had a situation where you had these unhinged maniac followers of Trump who, some of them were looking for violence, some of them weren't, but some of them were looking for violence. They ended up getting into the Capitol, and instead of outright denouncing it and restoring law and order, Trump fed into the chaos and fed into the mayhem and spoke out of both sides of his mouth during an attempted insurrection. As I call it, the diet coup. It was definitely at least a riot in some respects. Some people are dead now. Some people had weapons. Guns were drawn on Capitol Hill. It was horrendous. It was horrendous. And Trump spoke out of both sides of his mouth and did provide aid and comfort to the people who were doing it. Remember when he called them very special people? Very special people. Let's protect our boys in blue. But this election's fraudulent and it's rigged and it's terrible and people shouldn't let this stand. Speaking out of both sides of his mouth the entire time. So I do think that Americans saw this and they felt like this is deeply un-American because you're basically trying to overthrow the American government. You're basically pouring fuel on the fire and making the situation worse and adding to the chaos, adding to the mayhem, and doing the opposite of promoting law and order. And the main point is, Trump lost the suburbs with threatening the Insurrection Act, and now the suburbs are beyond gone for Trump and the Republican Party at the moment. Because that's a block of voters. First of all, they all vote, right, overwhelmingly in incredibly high numbers, but they actually believe in law and order. They believe in law and order. suburban areas, that's, one of the most important things to them. And then you have this guy who pretends to be all in favor of law and order, and he adds to disorder, and he violates the law, and he violates the Constitution. He thinks it doesn't apply to him. And there are consequences for that. There are consequences for that. So now all that's left for Trump is his base, the most hardcore, ardent supporters. Now, I think there's a chance he drops to 30% or lower. I do. He's already at his lowest ever, but George W. Bush left office. I told you guys this the other day. His approval rating was either 22% or 29%. I know he got in the 20s, and I know Dick Cheney was in the teens. I think there's a chance Trump gets to 30 or lower. But this is already the worst it's ever been for him. He just went too far. He just, pissed people off a little bit too much. He was a little too chaotic. And I do think he shot himself in the dick for 2024 chances as well. I really do. I really do. Now, it's going to depend on what happens in terms of impeachment and what happens in terms of the 14th Amendment, and they could bar him from ever running for office again. But either way, I do think he sort of ruined his 2024 chances with this because it was just too much for everybody. The fever really broke. I told you, we looked at the national numbers the other day. Only 18% of Republicans support what happened on Capitol Hill. There's one poll that has it as high as 45% of Republicans, but I didn't see the wording on that poll yet, and my guess is the wording is not very straightforward. Whereas you look at the wording of the poll that had him at 18%, that seemed very straightforward to me. Like, do you support what happened on Capitol Hill, yesterday or a few days ago, whenever they did the poll? And only 18% supported it. So 8% of national adults. So these are numbers that are abysmal. Even if you take the worst number, which is the 45% of Republicans number, that's less than half of Republicans that supported this. So I just think he went too far. I just think the fever has broken. And I think, honestly, Americans are breathing a sigh of relief that this guy's on his way out the door. You don't fuck around with, the most basic tenets of democracy, Like, you don't... I think there are massive consequences if you try to downplay or overrule or override the peaceful transition of power. And again, I have anecdotal evidence to this effect as well, because I have people in my own family who were big Trump supporters who are now done with him. And they're like, I got it, dude. You think you were cheated. You weren't cheated. It's over. Move along, son. Hold the L. If he's losing people who were formerly massive supporters, it is different. It's categorically different this time around compared to how it was. So anyway, there you have it. Trump's approval rating, 33%, 34% respectively. Let's see how low he can go.